What's going on, guys? Now, probably one of the most commonly asked questions on my channel is still related to trailer tires. Now, notice I didn't specifically say RV tires, I said trailer tires because most RVs simply have trailer tires on them. It's not an RV specific tire. That said, I've made videos on this topic going back 8 years. And in my earliest videos, I mentioned that most trailer tires were junk. They weren't great. And there were only a few brands that you should really look at unless you're willing to spend a tremendous amount of money. At the time, Saloon was one of those brands. And I'm still gonna say today, Saloon makes a good quality tire if you get it in a G or H rated tire. Now, that said, a lot has changed over the years, and I made a video about 3.5 to 4 years ago that was kind of an update, but this video is going to be the most current update I have in regards to trailer tires, what's available, and what you should look at for your RV or really any type of trailer you plan on towing. Hang tight, I'll be right back. Okay, so in front of me, you were looking at the tires that came on our 2024 Forest River Surveyor Legend. Now, the Legend is actually the lower cost Surveyor. It's more of the budget, value-friendly version of a Surveyor. They have a Grand Surveyor, which is more expensive and has more luxury amenities. But this Surveyor, even though it's more on the value side of travel trailers, it still came with some really good quality tires. And these are Goodyear endurance tires. So a lot of people will look at the Goodyear brand going way back, saying they used to make China bombs. They used to make some really terrible tires for RVs. But about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Goodyear came out with their Endurance series of tire, which is actually a pretty dang good quality trailer tire. Now, this tire is not to be used on your tow vehicle. This is not to be used on your pickup truck or SUV. It's specifically designed for trailering applications, but they did a great job with the overall design. They put a rub ring around the outside of it in case you hit a curb, so it's not as likely to get damaged. It's a higher quality US manufactured tire, and for the most part, they've been performing well. Probably the most critical thing to still keep in mind though with tires is that you want to be sure that they're not damaged, that you maintain correct air pressure for the specific load that you'll be applying to them. And all manufacturers are traditionally going to have some type of a chart that tells you if I have a tire that can support up to, let's say, 80 PSI, but I'm only going to be putting a certain amount of weight on it, what is the ideal pressure rating to have in that tire for the load that I'll be carrying on it? The reason why that's so important is because that can avoid premature wear or odd wear, where you have maybe the outer edge of the tire wearing and the inside not wearing at all, or the inside wearing and the outer edge not wearing. Those types of scenarios will typically be indicative of incorrect tire pressure to the amount of weight that you are loading on it. For instance, if I don't have enough tire pressure in the tire and I have too much weight on them because of that, then the outer edge of the tire is going to wear quicker because the inner is going to be sagging in. If I have too much tire pressure and not enough load to actually compress it flat on the road, then the inner portion or the middle portion of the tire will actually wear quicker than the outer portion. And these are all things that can lead to potential failure. So just keep that in mind. Now, fortunately, we live in a time where Goodyear isn't the only good tire you can get for trailers. Carlisle makes good tires, Maxxis makes good tires, and shoot, even the Trailer King tire is an affordable tire that's had a pretty good success rate in terms of longevity and being able to last for most trailering applications. Rainier is also a very popular tire, but it definitely falls more towards the budget, entry, cheaper level of tire, and I wouldn't really compare it directly with like a Goodyear Endurance or a Carlisle or a Maxxis tire. Now let's move up to some heavier duty tires. So if you're wanting something a little bit more heavy duty for a lighter duty trailer with smaller wheel diameter, you may want to consider the Trans Eagle tire. Now, Trans Eagle is a lesser known brand than Goodyear and Maxxis and Carlisle, yet they have been known to make some incredibly robust tires, especially for the smaller wheel diameters. So in front of me, you're looking at a tubeless all steel radial. This is a G-rated tire for a 15-inch wheel. That is very, very rare, and there aren't a lot of brands that do this. There may be a few out there, but this is certainly one of them, and this is certainly one that's actually gained a really, really strong following for folks who want an overbuilt tire for a lighter application. Now, overbuilt tire all steel, G-rated doesn't always mean it's a better tire for your application. Mainly because if you don't have any type of improved shock absorption capability with your equalizer, with your suspension setup, having something like this is going to put a much stiffer sidewall on your tire, and your tire acts as a form of suspension for your vehicle. It compresses. It is basically a big rubber airbag. So the thicker, the firmer, the more rigid the tire, the less likely it's going to bounce and flex under load, which means it could easily transfer more shock into your RV. But if you do have a heavier RV and it's, using 15-inch wheels, this is definitely a tire you might want to consider. They're certainly more expensive than a lot of competing tires, but the fact is, it's one of the very few all-steel G-rated tires that you can get for a 15-inch wheel. Just be cautious that your wheel can actually withstand the pressure requirements that you need to fill these tires up. And if your rim does not have the rating to support that type of PSI, then you have to be very cautious. Now, the second side of this is you really only need to put enough air in the tire based on the manufacturer's chart to support the load you plan on carrying. So you may not need to put 80 PSI in here or 110 PSI in here. You can possibly run it lower, again, depending on what the chart says about how much load you'll be applying to these tires and what the correct air pressure for them would be with that load. So now we're looking at the micro dump trailer, which has these Trail Quest tires on them. But this is a tire and a brand that you might actually see on some trailers that you purchase, whether it's a travel trailer, utility trailer, or a dump trailer. And just because it is a less known brand and just because it's likely an overseas manufactured brand doesn't mean that the tire is going to fail on you instantly. If the tires have a good manufactured date, basically they haven't expired, they're not 5 to 7+ years old, you don't have a tremendous amount of miles on them, you maintain them, you maintain the pressure, and you move them around a bit. You don't let them just sit stagnant, not moving for too long of a period of time, just so you can make sure that the chemicals in the rubber stay pliable. They're going to last you probably all the way up to about 10,000 miles. Again, depending on how you use it. This trailer will never see long over-the-road highway use. We're not going to go on a 5,000-mile trip with this trailer. At least I don't plan on it. And because of that, we don't worry too much about the heat in these tires building up excessively. We don't worry too much that we're going to be traveling 75 miles an hour down the road with this thing behind us. And those are all reasons that I'm not as concerned about the tires on this trailer and upgrading to something super, super robust or super, super high end. Because again, it all comes down to how you use the tire as well. I'm not going to overload them. I'm not going to do anything that causes these tires to fail prematurely outside from a manufacturer's defect that could potentially occur. And believe it or not, that does not happen very often on trailers like this, cargo trailers, utility trailers, things like that, because you're typically towing them slower, you're typically towing them shorter distances, and you're typically monitoring them a little bit more because you understand that if I load this thing up with a tremendous amount of weight, I'm going to be putting a lot more pressure on tires like these. But for tires on a trailer like this, they're more likely to actually expire before they wear out too much or before I have any type of catastrophic failure with them. But this is an example of a tire and a brand that I would not put on a travel trailer, or that I would remove from a travel trailer relatively quick if you plan on taking a longer road trip where the exposure to sun, the exposure to high speeds and heat are definitely going to be more of a concern, especially as the pressure builds up when these heat up while you're driving down the road. Now here's another brand of trailer tire, and this one actually is a very good brand that a lot of people are really starting to appreciate now, and that is Gladiator. So Gladiator, I'm not going to say is new on the market. They've been around for some time, but they're becoming more popular. These tires right here are super robust tires. These are a 235 85/16. This is something that you could potentially see on an RV or a fifth wheel or something with 16-inch wheels, but they have a great reputation to be a super reliable tire. Now these tires right here are a G load range tire, which means that they are an all steel design, and that's also going to lend to a tire that's going to be more robust and be able to handle more weight. The maximum inflation on one of these tires is going to be about 110 PSI, and each tire has a load range of 4,400 pounds. So again, this is the type of tire that you would see on some RVs. This is a brand that a lot of people are actually putting on their fifth wheels and their larger trailers because it's been a very, very reliable brand for a lot of folks. So I have no problems with the Gladiator brand. I've heard a lot of good things about them, and you're starting to see them a lot more on commercial applications as well. Now here's a brand some of you may or may not have heard of, but it's actually very popular when it comes to the dump trailer and the utility trailer industry, and that is Trailfinder. These are actually J load range tires, which means they have an insane amount of cargo carrying capacity. These are 235, 75, 17.5-inch tires. They're made in China, so this is an imported overseas tire. A lot of tires are, especially when you get into this super heavy duty series tire. Believe it or not, there are not a lot of American manufactured tires. Most of them are going to come from Asia, and that's just pretty much the same across the board. Even some of the super high-end Goodyears in the super heavy-duty tire space, a lot of these are actually international brands. So just keep that in mind. This is an all-steel radial tire. Load capacity on one of these tires over 6,000 pounds. So they have an insane amount of cargo capacity. If you want to put that into perspective, one of these tires has the carrying capacity to be able to carry the entire weight of the Surveyor loaded to near capacity. That's pretty crazy. But these are known to be pretty dang good tires, but they're actually pretty affordable as well. So if you're going to replace these, you're going to pay a lot just because it's a J load range tire, which is going to be crazy. You're not going to typically want to put something like this on a fifth wheel because it's going to be a very, very, very stiff sidewall. Even if this tire were flat, it would actually look like it had some air in it because the sidewall is so stiff. Now, that said, if you do plan on putting something like this on a fifth wheel, because the next tire we show you will be a J load range tire on our fifth wheel, be sure that you have some really, really good enhancements to your suspension just so you mitigate the amount of shock that is going to transfer from this assembly to the chassis and then the superstructure of your RV. Because again, without a lot of sidewall flex here, you're basically transferring a lot more shock into your RV. Okay, so in front of you, you're looking at the last tire we're going to talk about. This is the Continental HTL2 Eco Plus tire. This was a collaboration with Continental when we got the Brookstone. This tire right here is a J load range tire. Super, super heavy duty tire. And it actually replaced the Goodyear J load range tires that we had on here when we got the RV. Now, some people might think just because they were Goodyear that they're a US manufactured tire. They're not. They were not manufactured in the US. And this tire as well is not a US manufactured tire. These are made in the Czech Republic. So even though there are some of these that are manufactured here in the US, same with Goodyear and some other brands, a lot of times these super heavy duty commercial grade tires are actually manufactured overseas. Now, something to keep in mind, this is the type of tire that you might see on a super heavy duty lowboy trailer hauling a bulldozer. They are crazy, crazy robust tires. And because of that, we have to have a shock absorption upgrade to our RV. We need to reduce as much road shock from transferring through the sidewall of this tire into the suspension and then the chassis as possible. And that's the reason why we wanted to go with a really, really high-end shock absorbing equalizer. And this is something I would encourage to anybody who's putting a super robust tire on their RV. RVs already rattle themselves apart because you have so much jostling and vibration that goes into the chassis and then the structure, that having a suspension equalizer with upgraded suspension components to it can certainly help any RV. But if you're going to be putting super robust tires on your RV, you would definitely want to add something like that, because you're probably going to increase the amount of shock and vibration by 15-20% or more just by putting a super stiff sidewall tire on your RV, regardless of the size of RV you have. Anytime you upgrade to a more robust tire, you will be transferring more shock into the RV itself. But this is an example of a premium tire. These tires are like $500 per tire. They're very expensive, maybe even a little bit more than that. The ones I showed you on my dump trailer, the J-rated tires from more of a budget brand, those are going to be more in the $250 price range. So probably half the price or maybe even a little less than that. And when you're looking at Goodyear Endurance and you're looking at a lot of your traditional 15-inch tires, you're going to be looking about $125 to $200 per tire for a quality tire. There are a lot of cheaper brands out there that you can get for a budget price. Just keep in mind though, a lot of those tires are fine if you're going to be traveling locally, if you're not going to be going on highways or interstates for extended periods of time, if they're not going to develop a lot of heat, if they're not going to have a lot of road usage. But anytime you're planning on using a tire on something that could spend hours and hours and hours driving over hot roads in crazy conditions, you definitely want to go with a quality brand. Continental, Goodyear, Maxxis, Saloon, Cooper, Michelin, BF Goodrich, Hankook, and several other brands make really, really great quality tires, and you should always look for a good quality tire for your RV. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up. We'll talk to you again very soon.